Little girl I helped returned with her mother days later. Now her mother begs me to be her husband. The rain never stopped on Illustra 7, and neither did the silence. It wasn't a silence born of peace, but of absence, of voices, of footsteps, of human noise. It crept into the seams of Barry's mind, wrapping around the weeks and years like moss on stone. Even inside the dome, where machines hummed and vines hissed softly with mist-fed breath, the stillness was constant. 3 years alone. 3 years since Concord officials stripped him of his title, boarded him on a shuttle, and sealed his name in bureaucratic shame. Terraforming biogeneticist Barry Halden Marin, exiled under Article 9.3, unauthorized use of sentient encoded gene stock. The tribunal hadn't needed to say more. No criminal sentence, just guilt, publicity, and then the offer. Go quietly to Illustra 7, maintain the Terradome, stay useful, stay gone. So he came, and the dome thrived. Now moss rippled across the irrigation plates, vines pressed against glass, and pale leaf trees stretched up into the synthetic morning light. It was his Eden and his prison. Barry crouched beside the root bed of a chlorophyll cluster, recalibrating the nutrient veins. His hands moved on autopilot, loosen the clasp, adjust the flow, wipe the buildup. Everything precise, everything cataloged. Order was the only thing that held the silence back. Then he saw it. 3 ovale fruits, gone from the central tree. Again, no animal could have reached that high. The moss beneath was disturbed, faint depressions still wet where someone had walked barefoot. Small, but deliberate. His chest tightened. It had happened yesterday and the day before. Each morning he left fruit. Each morning it disappeared. A week ago he'd glimpsed her. A child. Blue-skinned, white-haired. No taller than his waist. Peering out from behind the nutrient tanks with eyes glowing like distant starlight. She hadn't spoken. Just vanished into the undergrowth. He hadn't reported it. Couldn't. Not to the Concord. Not after what they did to people who weren't supposed to exist. Instead, he left more fruit. This morning, something changed. The sensors chimed just once, a low pulse. Movement near the southeast quadrant. Not wind, not wildlife. Something bipedal. 2 signatures. Barry froze. He didn't reach for a weapon. There were none. Just the worn spade at his belt and a small med kit strapped to his hip. Then came a sound. Barefoot steps pattering over wet moss. A faint laugh. "Mr. Tree Man?" Barry turned sharply. She stood just inside the dome's light. Thin, wet, grinning. Her skin gleamed pale blue beneath the mist, and her long white hair clung to her shoulders like silk thread vines. A woven satchel swung at her side. Her eyes were enormous, violet, luminous, unafraid. "I brought her," she whispered. "I told Mama you're not mean." Barry didn't move. She took 2 light steps forward and tilted her head. "You remember me? I'm Kivra." Then he saw her, emerging slowly from the underbrush, tall, regal, even in exhaustion. The woman's long white hair was braided but soaked and frayed. Her blue skin shimmered with residual bioluminescence, though the glow was faint, broken in places. Her tunic was patched and uneven, rain-muddied and clinging to her legs. She leaned slightly on her daughter, though tried to mask it. Kivra beamed. "She's my mama." The woman stepped forward 1 pace, then dropped to 1 knee. "My name is Niari," she said quietly, almost without breath. Her voice was strange, rounded vowels, soft consonants, accented but clear. She kept her head bowed. Rain whispered down the dome overhead, its rhythm slow and constant. "I have no caste. My child is not registered. If the Concord finds us, they'll take her." Her voice caught. "She will be re-educated, mind-washed, remade. She won't be Kivra anymore." Barry remained silent. "I was once Valari nobility," Nyari said. "Then I bore a child without a sanctioned bond. Her father died before she was born. I was cast out, branded." She touched her collarbone, where faded glyphs etched into her skin pulsed weakly, half erased by exile. "I've run for years. You're the only one I could reach. We've watched your dome for weeks." Her hands trembled slightly. "Under Concord law, a cross-species bond grants temporary asylum. If I'm married to you, even by contract, my child becomes protected." She lifted her head at last. Her eyes were silver, hollowed with fatigue and fear. "Please. You don't have to love me. You don't have to touch me. Just give her a name that can't be erased." Kivra stepped closer, unbothered by her mother's tension. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a smooth black stone, polished and shiny. "It's for you," she said, "to say thank you for the fruit." Barry looked down at her small hands. The stone had no meaning, and yet it meant everything. She tilted her face up. "Can I stay?" "I can help in the garden. I'm not scared of worms." Barry exhaled, slow and unsteady. He didn't speak yet. Instead, he crouched low, knees soaking in the moss, bringing himself level with them. He looked at Nyari, this proud, broken woman who refused to plead even when she was clearly desperate, and at the bright, persistent girl who carried joy like sunlight clutched in small fingers. He had chosen exile, chosen solitude, but maybe the dome had been waiting for something else all this time. "You and Kivra can stay," he said softly. "If the bond protects her, then I'll sign whatever papers they need. But I'm not doing this to erase a record." He reached out, not touching Nyari, just offering an open hand between them. "I'm doing this because no child should have to hide to be real." Nyari stared at his hand. Her shoulders trembled once, almost imperceptibly. Then she reached out, hesitating only a heartbeat before placing her fingers lightly over his. Kivra giggled and threw her arms around his neck without waiting. "Mama, does this mean I can sleep in the glowy flower room?" she asked. "It smells like warm suns." Barry smiled. A rare thing. The girl's warmth in his arms was startling. "Yes," he murmured. "You can sleep there." Above them, the dome's lights shifted faintly, mimicking the break of morning. A faint flicker of motion pulsed in the corner of Barry's HUD display. Satellite drift. No ships inbound. Yet. But a soft warning flashed once. Passive Concord scan. Proximity ping registered. He closed the alert. Later. For now, they were safe. For now, the dome was full of life. And, for the first time in a long time, so was he. The corridor lights adjusted as they walked, dimming to a low amber glow that mimicked early dusk. Barry led the way in silence, one arm supporting Kivra, who had gone limp in sleep, the other gripping the pack of nutrient tablets he'd taken from the storage wall near the kitchen node. Behind him, Nyari moved with quiet precision. No wasted steps, no rustling fabric. But even without looking, he could feel her suspicion trailing him like a second shadow. The dome had accepted many things over the last 3 years. Root rot, blight storms, unauthorized reseeding. But it had never accepted guests. Not until now. He opened the auxiliary quarters access panel and stepped aside. Nyari hesitated at the threshold. The room beyond was small but intact. 2 sleeping pads folded against the back wall, a sanitation station with a working filtration spout, and a heat strip embedded into the flooring. Dust clung to the corners like dried ash. No one had entered since the last maintenance cycle, at least 16 months ago. Kivra stirred, mumbling something incoherent about glowy flowers. Barry crouched and set her down on the thinner of the mats. She curled instinctively onto her side, fist tucked beneath her cheek. Nyari crossed the room slowly. She didn't speak, just knelt beside her daughter and touched the girl's forehead with the back of her fingers, her thumb brushing a small bruise near her temple that Barry hadn't noticed earlier. The gesture was practiced, almost ritualistic. "She hasn't eaten warm food in days," she murmured. Barry nodded once. "I'll get something started." He left them there and moved through the central greenhouse corridor toward the galley. It wasn't much. A meal station, synth stove, a small processor that still made passable root broth if you coaxed the heating coils just right. He worked without thought, hands moving through old motions, water purification, heating strip activation, nutrient paste stirred into broth with a protein infusion dissolved beneath. It wasn't gourmet, but it was warm, it was clean, and it would keep them alive. Back in the room, Nyari hadn't moved. She sat cross-legged beside Kivra, fingers still in the girl's hair, staring at nothing. When Barry set the bowl down, Nyari reached for it, too quickly. Her hands trembled the moment they closed around the ceramic. She lifted the bowl but didn't drink right away. Steam rolled up around her face, softening the sharpness in her features. Then she took a sip. The sound she made was almost inaudible, a small hitch in her throat, halfway between a breath and a sob. She lowered the bowl again. "I haven't tasted heat in so long," she whispered. Barry said nothing. He simply sat across from her on the floor, knees aching from the pressure of the dome's polymer tile. "I know it isn't much," he said, "but it's clean, safe. That's more than most places," she replied. She finished the soup in silence. When she set the empty bowl aside, her shoulders sagged, just slightly, just enough to be noticed. Barry leaned back, resting on one elbow. Kivra's soft breaths filled the space between them. "How long were you watching the dome?" he asked. Nyari looked up at him. Her silver eyes were calmer now, but still wary. 3 weeks. We stayed close to the geothermal caverns near the ridge. Only came down at night. "Why now?" She hesitated. "Because we ran out of time." Barry didn't press. The tension in her voice made it clear. Whatever chased them, it wasn't just hunger or weather. He watched her adjust Kivra's blanket again. Her fingers paused at the girl's collar, lingering on a faint purplish line beneath the fabric. An old mark. A burn. Barry's jaw tightened. Did someone hurt her? Nyari didn't look up. Not since we left Villari airspace. Before that, punishment was common. For both of us. She said it with no emotion, as if the weight of it had long since turned to stone inside her. Barry swallowed the sharpness in his throat. "You came to the one man the conquered forgot," he said, more to himself than her. "Smart." "You're not forgotten," Nyari said, surprising him. "You're watched." He looked at her sharply. She met his gaze now, unblinking. "There was a ping, Concord sourced, day before yesterday. They were scanning this quadrant." Barry exhaled slowly. "I saw it too." "You should assume we were followed," she added. "It's what I would do if I were them." A long silence settled between them. Finally, she shifted. "Why did you say yes? You didn't even hesitate." "I did," Barry said. "You just didn't see it." Nyari tilted her head slightly, waiting. "I've spent the last 3 years pretending this dome was a kind of justice," he said. "Like I deserved it. A clean exile, no chains, just plants, just silence." He looked down at his own hands. "But then a child appeared out of nowhere, barefoot and hungry, and trusted me with a shiny rock. That kind of belief doesn't happen often." Her expression softened. "Besides," he added, "the conquered wouldn't waste a trap on someone like me." They already won. Nyari stared at him for a long moment. Then, without warning, she stood. "I need to clean myself before I contaminate this place any further." Barry nodded and pointed to the adjoining washroom. "Running water. Sanitary agents are labeled in both tongues." She hesitated at the door. Her hand gripped the frame just a little too tightly. "Do you have spare clothes?" "Not your fit," he said, "but I'll find something close." She disappeared through the door. Barry sat in the growing quiet, watching Kivra sleep. Her features were delicate, almost translucent in the low light, and her breath made the smallest whistling noise as it passed through her nose. She curled tighter into the blanket like a seed waiting for warmth. He didn't know how long he sat there. Eventually, Nyari emerged. Her skin was no longer dulled by grime, and her long white hair had been combed back in damp waves. She wore a repurposed biosuit undershirt and drawstring pants, too loose at the waist but better than rags. Her markings, faint bioluminescent traces along her collarbone and temples, were clearer now, though still faded. "You didn't have to prepare a room for us," she said. "I didn't," Barry replied. "It was already here, just waiting." She studied him in the quiet. Then, "You think you're the only one who lost something?" "I don't," Barry said. "I think we both lost too much to ever be the same." She gave him a look, sharp, appraising. Then she nodded once and lowered herself carefully to the other sleeping mat. It wasn't an act of trust, not yet, but she didn't sleep with her back to the door. That, Barry decided, was enough for now. As the dome lights dimmed to mimic night, a low pulse echoed through the environmental node, too faint for alarms. Another ping. Conquered proximity scan. 1 degree closer than before. He disabled the log and turned the display to black. Outside, the rain began again, soft and endless against the glass. Inside, for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like protection. The next morning broke with a hush. No system chimes, no announcements. Just the slow awakening of Illustra 7's biodome systems shifting from night mode to morning cycle. The light inside the dome warmed from amber to pale gold, filtering softly through condensation-laced glass and casting gentle shadows over the floor. Barry was already up, seated on the observation bench near the eastern nutrient bed, nursing a mug of synthesized tea that tasted vaguely of mint and metal. The humidity inside the dome had risen a few points overnight. He'd have to recalibrate the mist dispersion before midday, or the root trays would start molding near the undergrowth. Normally, he'd have addressed it already, but this morning he found himself pausing. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone, and the silence around him wasn't hollow, it was resting. From behind the corridor partition, a small sound broke the stillness, a sleepy yawn, then the soft thud of small bare feet padding against tile. Kivra appeared in the doorway, hair wild from sleep, one hand rubbing her eyes, the other dragging a faded cloth she must have clutched through the night. She spotted Barry and beamed. "You're still here," she said, as if it were a surprise. "I live here," Barry replied with a faint smile. She trotted over, dropped the cloth, and leaned against his knee, like she'd done it 100 times before. "The bed was soft. I thought maybe we dream-slept it." "No dream," he said. "Just insulated foam and real heat." She blinked up at him. "I didn't have dreams, only warm." She said it like warm was a feeling as rare and wondrous as flying. Barry felt something tighten in his chest. He set the mug down. "You hungry?" Kivra nodded so fast her hair floated. "Yes, but not squishy root soup again. My tongue doesn't like it." Barry chuckled. "Noted." He stood, ruffled her head gently, a touch she didn't flinch from, and guided her toward the food prep module. As he stirred together a basic starch-protein blend and heated some fruit compote, Kivra wandered off, humming tunelessly. He watched her skip through the corridor with her arms held out like wings, whispering things to herself and stopping to examine everything. Light panels, vent grills, a spilled cluster of nutrient bulbs like they'd fallen from a pocket universe. Barry felt his instincts kick in, the careful cataloging of movement, posture, energy levels. She was thin, but her color had improved. Her breathing was clear, eyes focused. She wasn't sick, not yet. When he turned back toward the meal tray, Nyari was there. She stood in the doorway with damp hair braided back, her posture still alert, but her face, softer than it had been the night before. "You let her wander," she said, not accusing, more surprised than anything. "She's 5, Barry said. "Curiosity's the job description." Nyari entered slowly. Her movements had a quiet precision, as though she were always conserving energy, always prepared to run. Barry handed her a small bowl of the same mix he'd made for Kivra. She accepted it with a nod. "You didn't have to cook. You didn't have to ask me to save your daughter," Barry replied evenly. "But you did." For a few beats they ate in silence. Kivra returned and sat cross-legged on the bench, nose wrinkling at the food but still eating with 2 hands. Her appetite was real now. Nyari watched her for a moment, then set her bowl aside. "She's never been in a place this large where the walls didn't listen." Barry arched a brow. "You mean surveillance?" Nyari nodded. "In Valari society, all public spaces report movement and sound to upper caste auditors. Even breathing wrong can be a mark against you. She doesn't act like someone raised under that kind of scrutiny." "She wasn't," Nyari said. "I ran with her before she could walk. We've been moving ever since. Caves, shipwrecked modules, old terra stations. She's resilient. She's too young to know what fear should feel like." Barry glanced at Kivra, who was now trying to lick compote from the edge of the bowl. Nyari's gaze followed, and something flickered in her expression. Regret, maybe envy, maybe both. "Last night," she said quietly now, "I didn't sleep until I could hear your breathing from the hallway. I noticed." "You don't trust us either," Barry turned to her. "I trust what I see," he said. "You protect her like someone who's lost too much. She trusts like someone who's never been betrayed." Nyari flinched, just a small shift, but it was there. She turned away, running her thumb across the edge of the table. "I don't know how long we can stay. You must realize that." "I do. And you still let us in?" "I'm not sure that was a decision," Barry said. "More like inevitability." Nyari didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. Kivra broke the silence. "Mama, can I show him the glowing leaf?" Nyari blinked. "Which one?" "The one in the moss room with the little lights. It tickled me last night." Barry stood. "You mean the pink leaf cluster? That room's warmest this time of day." He held out a hand to the girl. "Lead the way." Kivra took his hand with absolute confidence and skipped ahead, pulling him down the central corridor, past irrigation lines and growth tanks. The room she led him to was one of the original bioencapsulation chambers, used during early terraforming for atmospheric testing. Now, it was a dense jungle of microflora, Glowing fronds, spore-puffed vines, and bioluminescent spores drifting like dandelions in the filtered light. She gasped like it was her first time seeing it, even though it wasn't. "It's a jungle party," Barry laughed softly. "That's one way to put it." He bent beside her, pointing at one of the pulse lights shifting color in a leaf cluster. "See that? It changes when it senses moisture on your skin, like a greeting." Kivra touched it and squealed as it shimmered from pink to soft blue under her fingers. "It likes me!" Nyari appeared in the doorway, watching, arms folded, but she wasn't tense anymore, just quiet. Maybe wondering how a dome built for isolation had become the safest place she'd seen in years. Barry stood, brushing dirt from his knees. He met her gaze. "You're not a burden here," he said. "This place was never meant to be empty." Nyari stepped forward slowly. "And yet you kept it that way." "Because I thought I was supposed to." She tilted her head. "And now?" He hesitated. "Now I'm wondering if exile isn't the worst place to begin again." Kivra laughed behind them, chasing a glowing beetle along the moss path. The biolights pulsed brighter for just a moment, a heartbeat in the dome. From somewhere above, the scanner node issued a faint click, background hum shifting. Barry glanced toward the overhead display near the door, another passive ping, higher frequency. Concord systems were getting closer. He looked back to Nyari. She'd seen it too. She didn't panic, didn't move, but her jaw set just a little tighter. Barry nodded once. No words exchanged. She understood. They had time, but not forever. And yet, standing here in the filtered jungle light, with a glowing child playing between them, it was enough, for now. The storm rolled in without warning. Barry had barely noticed the pressure shift until the dome's integrity alarms chimed softly, a low-frequency pulse that reverberated through the floor like the heartbeat of a restless planet. He tapped the nearest terminal, brows knitting as a series of orange-coded alerts flickered across the screen. Moisture overload. Pressure deviation in subsection D. "Wonderful," he muttered. "Just what we needed." He slipped into his boots, grabbed his toolkit, and pulled a utility vest over his shirt. As he crossed into the corridor, Nyari intercepted him, one arm draped in a clean rag, her expression already sharp. "You felt it?" she asked. "Pressure sensors are reading instability in the western greenhouse. I need to reset the dehumidifier valves manually before mold takes over." "I'll come." Barry hesitated. "I know how to use tools," Nyari added, already tightening the wrap around her wrist. "And you'll finish faster with help." She wasn't wrong. He nodded once, and they moved quickly down the service corridor, boots thudding against the metal flooring as distant thunder rumbled against the dome's thick skin. Not real thunder, atmospheric vibration from the storm front passing over Elistra 7's surface. The terrace heating outside hadn't finished stabilizing, so localized lightning storms often sparked above the dome, lashing energy against the reinforced panels. In the greenhouse's far wing, vines trembled with residual static as Barry pried open the floor hatch. Moist air rushed out, heavy and sour. "Humidity's over 70%, he said. "If it climbs any higher, the root clusters will collapse." Nyari crouched beside him. "Which valves?" Barry pointed. "The two to the right. I'll take the far one." She slid past him without hesitation. He watched her a moment longer than necessary, her movements clean, precise, not tentative. She wasn't a noble anymore, but her posture hadn't forgotten where she came from. They worked in silence for several minutes, the hiss of tools and the soft rattle of shifting panels their only soundtrack. The air grew thicker, charged with static and unspoken things. Finally, Nyari broke it. "You keep this place alive like it's your penance." Barry didn't look up. "Isn't it?" "No," she said simply. "Penance implies guilt, but I've only seen care in how you touch things. You love this place." "I did once," he admitted. "Now I think I love what it allows me to forget." A long pause followed, then her voice lower. "What did you do?" He tightened a panel before answering. "I modified a photosynthetic root algorithm. It wasn't approved for deployment, but it worked, too well." She glanced over. The roots developed early neural responses, faster than expected. They started reacting to stimuli in coordinated ways, patterns, rhythms. Sentience? I don't know, but the council panicked. They shut the trial down, deemed it biologically unethical, and you fought them. I didn't think they had the right to decide what counted as life just because it made them uncomfortable. She leaned back on her heels. So they erased you. Not erased, just removed. Quietly, Without chains, without courts, just exile. Nyari tilted her head. You could have run too, like I did. I didn't want to be chased. I wanted to disappear. She absorbed that in silence. Rain began to hammer the dome harder now, the echoes trembling down through the glass like distant artillery. Do you regret it? She asked. Barry paused mid-motion. Every day I think I do, until I realize what kind of man I'd have to be not to. Nyari exhaled slowly, her voice quieter now. They killed Kivra's father before she was born, not for any crime, just for touching a noble's daughter without permission. She didn't cry. Her voice didn't crack, but her hands clenched tighter around the tool in her lap. I thought if I ran far enough, fast enough, I could make her invisible, but she shines too brightly. They always find us. Barry set his wrench down, looked across the shaft between them. You don't have to run anymore. I do, she said, her gaze flat. You've given us time, but Concord doesn't forget. One scan too many, and they'll send someone who won't be deterred by soil or sanctuary. We'll find a way, she studied him. You still say we like it means something. It does. Her eyes held his a second longer, then dropped to her knees. Barry stood first, offering a hand. This time she didn't hesitate. Her fingers slid into his palm, warm, firm. She rose with his help, their closeness lingering a second longer than it needed to. The rain above surged again, drumming with renewed force. He pulled the hatch shut and reset the seal. The greenhouse lights blinked once, then steadied. That should stabilize the pressure, he said. We'll monitor the levels overnight. Nyari nodded. As they returned to the main corridor, she slowed near the water collection tanks and brushed her fingers along the algae bloom hugging the edge. You make things grow, she murmured, even in exile. Barry said nothing, but he watched her, the way her shoulders no longer hunched as much, the way she walked as though the floor beneath her could be trusted. Later, as they returned to the living quarters, Kivra was curled up on the bench with a solar blanket tucked beneath her chin and a seed pod in her hand. She'd fallen asleep mid-sentence, mid-story, in the middle of a world that had, for now, stopped hunting her. Nyari knelt beside her daughter again. Barry turned to leave, but her voice caught him. She said you smell like tree skin and warm air. She means it kindly. Barry smiled faintly. That's better than what most humans called me before. She looked up at him. And what do you call yourself now? I don't know yet. Her gaze didn't shift. Maybe we'll both figure it out. He lingered in the doorway a moment longer, watching as she gently untangled a curl from Kivra's face. Her touch was careful, reverent. He didn't say goodnight. He just stepped out, letting the quiet return. Outside, the storm had begun to move eastward, its roar fading into a low hum. Inside the dome, the air was thick with growth, with the scent of clean soil and warming trust. Barry sat down in the observation room again, not to watch the monitors, but to listen. For once, the silence didn't accuse. It waited, like something slowly waking. The day began with stillness, but something in the air felt off. Barry noticed it first when he walked past the living quarters. Kivra, who normally greeted the morning with a burst of questions and barefoot stomps down the corridor, wasn't up. The door remained half-closed, light spilling dimly across the floor. No humming, no laughter, no sign of her usual mischief. He paused at the threshold, listening. Inside, Nyari sat on the edge of the cot, her posture rigid. Kivra was curled in her lap, swaddled in the solar blanket, small limbs limp beneath the folds. Her skin had lost its shimmer, dull now, almost gray-blue at the temples. Her cheeks were flushed in uneven patches, and her breathing came too fast. She didn't wake, Nyari said without looking up. Not once in the night. Barry stepped inside, instantly scanning her from a distance. Eyes, skin, pulse, respiratory rhythm. How long has her fever been climbing? Since before sunrise. She was shivering, then started to sweat. Nyari's voice was low and steady, but her eyes betrayed the fear behind her calm. I gave her a hydration patch. It didn't hold. Let me see her. Nyari didn't resist. She shifted slightly so Barry could crouch beside her and run the scanner over the girl's small frame. The diagnostic readout blinked. Elevated internal temperature, dehydration stage 2, nutrient absorption failure, systemic immune lag. Barry muttered, damn it, what does it mean? Her body's rejecting the synth food, could be residual from Valari immune design, maybe too long on raw rations, or her hybrid physiology's stressing her uptake functions. Can you treat it? I can stabilize her. But we'll need real food, actual enzymes, protein she can absorb. We have fruits, leaf paste. You grow everything in this place. For humans, yes. For her, we're guessing. Nyari went still. Barry stood and crossed to the cold storage unit, pulling out a sealed nutrient block. He broke it open, mixed it with warmed mineral broth, and dropped in a stim enzyme meant to restart sluggish digestive responses. It was a gamble, but the only one they had. Kivra groaned softly as Nyari coaxed her upright. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy, unfocused. She whimpered once. "It hurts in my tummy." Nyari pressed her lips to the girl's forehead, then gently tipped the bowl to her mouth. "Sip for me, Kivra. Just a little." The girl tried. The first swallow triggered a gag reflex, and Nyari's arms tensed around her. Barry stepped in quickly with a cloth, catching the spillage and checking her pulse again. They spent the next hour cycling heat modulation, hydration patches, and microdoses. Kivra faded in and out, sometimes whispering fragments of dreams or past memories. Names Barry didn't know, fragments of cave shadows and smells that didn't belong to this place. It was nearing midday when Nyari finally broke. She stood up and moved to the far wall, gripping the edge of the shelf. Her hands were shaking. Barry watched as she struggled to still them. "I've kept her alive through poison storms, through weeks without food. But now in a place with walls and heat and medicine, this is where she starts to fade?" Barry didn't answer. He knew there was nothing he could say to make that feel right. Nyari turned around, face pale with fury and helplessness. "Don't tell me this is better. That exile was worth it. That hiding in this dome with a stranger was the right choice." He stood from where he was kneeling and met her eyes. "I won't tell you any of that, but I will tell you this. If she were anywhere else right now, she'd already be gone." Nyari flinched, jaw clenching. She turned away again, swallowing hard. Barry stepped closer. "You think this place is weakness," he said. "But it's held 3 years of storms without breaking. It's not just soil and glass. It's designed to adapt." "She's not part of your design," Nyari whispered. "She's not part of anything." Barry softened. "She is now." They stood in silence. Kivra stirred behind them, muttering something in her sleep, something that sounded like flower room. Nyari moved to her daughter, knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "She wants to sleep in the glowy room." "She might rest easier there," Barry said. "The light triggers circadian response. Might soothe her neurosignals." "Can we move her safely?" "With help." Together, they wrapped Kivra in the soft insulation layer and gently carried her through the warm corridors toward the old Terraflora vault. The moment the heat sensors triggered the light panels, the room flooded with a soft pink glow. Vines shimmered in the filtered air. The room pulsed gently, like a heartbeat made of petals. Kivra sighed, a soft sound. Her limbs relaxed just slightly. They settled her on the thermal mat Barry pulled from storage. Nyari knelt beside her, folding the blanket just right, her hands never leaving the girl's frame. Barry stood near the door, unsure whether to speak. But Nyari looked up. "I used to think children were born into the world with no say in their fate," she said. "Now I wonder if she chose me, if somehow she knew." "Maybe," Barry said quietly. "Or maybe she's teaching you to survive in a way you weren't allowed to before." Nyari looked back down, brushing a stray lock of hair from Kivra's cheek. "She's stronger than I am." Barry hesitated, then stepped closer. "You're the reason she's still breathing." For a long moment, Nyari didn't move. Then, very slowly, she reached out and took Barry's hand. She didn't look at him, just held on. Not for him, for herself, for the moment, for something she couldn't name yet. Barry let her. The room was quiet, the light still pulsing, the air warm and full of breath and slow healing. They stayed like that until Kivra's breathing steadied, until her brow cooled, until Nyari's grip loosened, not in weakness, but in trust. And for the first time since her arrival, she fell asleep beside someone else without fear. The storm had passed, but Barry couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. He stood at the edge of the dome's main console station, eyes fixed on the long-range telemetry feed. For the past 4 days, the Concord's passive scans had hovered just beyond the safety margin, brief, random pings that could be shrugged off as routine. But this wasn't routine. A new signal had just appeared, stronger, focused, not a probe or an ambient relay. It was a beacon pulse, intentional, triangulated. Barry stared at the screen as the data assembled itself, vessel approaching. Unregistered drive pattern. Concorde-class chassis. Estimated arrival. 43 minutes. He didn't curse. He didn't slam a fist on the console. He simply stood there, one hand gripping the edge of the workstation, as though he could steady himself against what was coming. Barry? Nyari's voice was soft behind him, but alert. She stepped into the room, her expression shifting the moment she saw his face. What is it? He turned to her slowly. A ship, not a supply vessel, not a patrol drone. Something Concord engineered and unscheduled. Nyari's breath caught. They found us. They didn't land yet, but they will. She was already moving, gathering their bags, checking for her knife, eyes darting toward the corridor. We can run. Barry stepped in front of her. There's nowhere to run, Nyari. Illustra 7 is open soil and frozen ridges for over 100 kilometers in every direction. You wouldn't make it 2 days with Kivra like this. Nyari froze. She's still recovering, Barry added, gently now. Even if she could walk, the cold would kill her faster than the Concorde. Nyari's hands dropped, fists clenched at her sides. Then what do you suggest? I don't just keep this place alive, Barry said. I designed it, modified it. She narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? He stepped back toward the terminal and tapped open a hidden console menu, something buried under decades-old diagnostic layers. The screen shifted, revealing a schematic Nyari had never seen before. It means there's a level of subroute access in this dome that wasn't reported to the Concorde. I built it after my exile began. Defense systems, identity cloaking, radiation camouflage. It was my insurance policy, in case they ever decided to take even this away from me. Nyari stepped closer. Can you hide us? I can try, but it won't hold if they physically breach the dome. Once they're inside, all bets are off. Nyari's face was unreadable. Her voice, when it came, was steady. Then we can't let them in. Barry didn't respond. The weight of what she was suggesting wasn't lost on either of them. From the corridor, Kivra called out sleepily, her voice thin. Mama? Nyari turned and vanished down the hallway without another word. Barry followed more slowly. Kivra was sitting up, cheeks pale but cooler than they'd been the day before. Her eyes found Barry, then her mother. Did I wake the plants up again? She asked. They were all glowing too much. Nyari sat beside her. No, little star. You're safe. Kivra smiled faintly and closed her eyes again. She didn't have the strength to stay awake long. Barry watched them in silence, then turned to the wall console and activated the dome's emergency protocol sequence. Outside, the light in the biodome shifted subtly, photosynthetic panels dimming to mimic nocturnal shutdown, pulse emitters reducing their electromagnetic footprint. Inside the command console, the artificial ID signature switched from Barry Marin, Terraformer, to Dome 7, vacant, maintenance required. A blank shell. It might work. It had to. Nyari returned to the control room and stood beside him. Her hair was still slightly damp from the mist cycles. Her arms crossed, not defensively, but in tension, like a held breath. If they land, will you lie to them? Yes, Barry said without hesitation. Will you lie well? Barry looked at her. They exiled me for telling the truth. I've had 3 years to get better at the alternative. Nyari stared at him, the corners of her mouth twitching with something close to respect, or maybe sorrow. If they find her, they won't. But if they do... Barry didn't look away. Then I'll claim her as mine. Nyari stiffened. That would make you a traitor to the Concorde. I was already a traitor when I let something live they wanted dead. Silence stretched between them. She broke it with a whisper. Why are you doing this? Because you and your daughter are the first things in 3 years that made me feel human again. Nyari stepped closer. You'd risk everything for a child that isn't yours? Barry's voice was quieter now. She's here, that's enough. There was a long pause. Then with slow deliberation, Nyari reached for him. Not hesitating this time, not testing. She touched his face, fingers feather-light against the rough line of his jaw. She's not the only one you've saved, she said. Then she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't desperate or possessive. It wasn't even long. But it was real, anchored in everything they hadn't said until now. A promise made with breath and skin, not words. When she pulled back, she didn't apologize. The terminal behind them chimed once. An alert. Vessel entering upper atmosphere. ETA, 19 minutes. They both turned to the screen. Barry breathed out slowly. Time to decide who we're going to be. Nyari's eyes were bright. We already did. Together they stepped toward the future, whatever form it would take, and behind them in the soft pink glow of the flower room, a little girl dreamed without fear. The conquered lander touched down with surgical precision, no wasted motion, no flourish, just the blunt metallic inevitability of authority arriving where it wasn't welcome. From the observation alcove, Barry watched the vessel's heat shimmer ripple across the outer moss layer as the landing struts sank into the softened ground. The dome's camouflage had held for precisely 16 minutes past their estimated scan arrival. That bought them time, not safety. He wasn't alone in the alcove. Nyari stood beside him, arms crossed, her posture composed but tight with the kind of stillness that came from years of running. Below them, Kivra slept in the insulated med pod near the base of the flower vault, still recovering but finally stable. The pink light of the flora pulsed gently around her like a second heartbeat. "They'll be inside within 10 minutes, Barry said. Tone low, precise. Will the identity scrambler hold? Until they step through the door. After that, they'll want visuals, DNA records, scans." He paused. "They'll be looking for you. And you're still ready to lie." "I don't need to lie," Barry said, turning toward her. "I just need to make them believe something close enough to the truth." She studied him. "And if they don't? I'll keep buying time until you and Kivra are clear. There's a secondary tunnel beneath the utility trench. It was meant for waste runoff, never mapped. You built an escape route. I built an endgame," Barry said quietly. "I just didn't know who it would be for." A long silence passed between them. Then Nyari reached up, touching the side of his face with the same certainty she'd once reserved for protecting her daughter. No hesitation, no fear. "I'm not leaving you," she said. "We decide together. We stand together." Barry closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. It felt like truth. The outer dome hatch hissed open. Metal boots struck the landing platform. Barry moved toward the control corridor, Nyari trailing behind him. They passed the living space in silence, past the soft hum of thermal lights, past the old research stations now housing meals and warmth and signs of life never meant to be seen by strangers. He stopped by the entry terminal and activated a final override. "All right," he said under his breath. "Let's meet the future." The inner door unlocked with a pressurized click. A second later, the Concord delegation entered, 4 officials clad in dark carbon silk uniforms, visors gleaming, weapons holstered but visible. The lead stepped forward, tall, pale, efficient. "Terraformer Marin," the officer said. "You've triggered a Class A anomaly alert. Your dome reports inconsistencies in population logs, energy consumption, and genetic waste data." Barry stepped forward calmly. "Old equipment. No maintenance ships in 18 months. I've had to run patches myself." The officer scanned him slowly. "You were assigned this dome under Article 9.3. You understand your rights are limited." "I haven't left the boundaries of the dome. I haven't contacted Earth. I haven't interfered with Concord operations. I've followed my assignment." "And yet," the officer said, taking another step forward, "our instruments registered 3 heat signatures in your structure this week. One of them a juvenile, humanoid, non-human." Barry didn't flinch. "A feral hybrid born from environmental interaction with my botanical splice field. It found the dome, injured. I treated it. You treated it. I provided basic medical aid, not citizenship, not shelter." The officer's face remained blank. "It is unlawful to conceal sapient offspring, especially non-registered ones. It isn't sapient. It mimics sounds, movement. It feeds. That's it." Nyari stood still, expression neutral. From behind the corridor, Kivra slept, unaware of the world now orbiting around the truth of her existence. "I'd like to see it," the officer said. Barry stepped aside, guiding them down the corridor. His heart thudded hard in his chest, but his face remained unreadable, controlled, the way it had to be. They entered the chamber slowly. Kivra lay nestled in the pod, surrounded by bioluminescent flora and the gentle hum of life support. Her skin was cool now, but the faint shimmer of her biolights was visible again. A soft pulse along her collarbone. The officer approached. Barry tensed, but Kivra stirred only slightly. She didn't wake. "She was found in Sector C2, Barry said. Starving, sick, no language, no markings. Yet she responds to your voice. She responds to warmth." The officer turned toward Nyari, who stood several paces away. You are? Barry answered for her. My assistant. Concord-approved caretaker, sent from the Southern Relay Dome after my solar array malfunctioned. We filed her transfer. The officer checked his wristpad. No such request existed. I see no record, Barry shrugged. System's old, relay net's unstable, but I can provide biometric scans. The officer's gaze narrowed. Do so, now. Barry moved to the terminal, pulling up falsified entries he'd spent the last 2 nights coding. Nyari's ID embedded beneath a deprecated cast entry. Just enough corruption to imply redirection errors. It wasn't perfect, but it was believable. The officer took the pad, scanned it, frowned. Then he turned back to Barry. Terraformer Marin, he said. This structure is under official review. Any confirmed breach of Concord regulation will result in reassignment or, if deemed malicious, extraction. Barry nodded. Understood. The officer paused a moment longer. Then he turned toward the door. We'll return in 72 hours. And just like that, they left. Barry stood still until the outer hatch sealed shut. Then he exhaled. Long and slow. Behind him, Nyari trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of still being here. They'll come back, she said. I know. They'll dig deeper. I know. She stepped forward, and for the first time, he let his shoulders fall. He leaned into her touch as she placed her hands against his chest. Their foreheads met. We need to formalize the bond, she said quietly. Legally. Concord law will register it. If I'm your spouse, Kivra's your dependent. It'll put me on the record. And her off of theirs, Barry nodded. I'll do it. A beat passed. Are you sure? She asked. He looked at her. I want to raise her, he said. Not because the law demands it, because she calls me Tree Man and thinks worms are funny. And because you, his voice cracked, because you make this place feel like a home. Nyari's breath shook. Barry, he silenced her with a kiss. It wasn't desperate, it wasn't defiant, it was real. The dome's interior light shifted with the hour. Outside, the storm front receded into the east, light fracturing across the glass in patterns like broken glass and sunrise. Later, they would register the bond at the terminal. Later, Barry would send the falsified paperwork into the Concord's overburdened network. Later, the law would see them as a family. But in the flower-lit room, with their daughter breathing easily for the first time in days and the world quiet around them, it was already true. No more hiding, no more running. They had chosen one another. And the dome, rooted, breathing, alive, held them safely in its care.